The shop phone rang at 10:17 on a Wednesday, and Daniel Hatch wiped his hands on a rag he already knew was useless. The number on the cradle was the elementary school, and the school did not call at 10:17 for good reasons. "Mr. Hatch, it's Principal Eames. Is Wyatt all right?" A pause that lasted half a breath too long. "Wyatt is safe. He's in the nurse's office with Mrs. Lynn, but we need to talk, and I'd like to do it today, in person, if you can come." Daniel set the rag on the bench. The lift behind him was holding a customer's Tahoe 4 feet off the floor, and the customer was in the waiting room reading a 4-year-old fishing magazine. "I'll be there at 11, Daniel said. He hung up, and for 2 seconds the shop seemed loud in a way it had not been a minute ago. The compressor breathing, the radio talking about a county fair, a wrench clacking in the second bay where his apprentice Manny was finishing brakes. Daniel walked the 10 steps to the waiting room and stopped in the doorway. 4 people were sitting in it. The Tahoe customer, a heavy man in a Carhartt jacket named Ron, an old woman with white hair pinned back, knitting something the size of a placemat, a young woman in scrubs from the urgent care 2 blocks over, her shoulders pulled inward, and a kid maybe 19 with a skateboard between his sneakers and a bandage on his jaw, here for an alignment because he had hit a curb. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I have to leave for an hour. School thing." Ron lowered the magazine. "Your boy?" "My boy." The old woman looked up from her knitting. Her name, Daniel knew from a year of small talk, was Edna Frawley, and she came in every 6 weeks to have someone explain to her why her brake light kept coming on. "Go ahead, Mr. Hatch, we're not going anywhere. I'd planned to have Mr. Whitley's truck back to him by 12. "I'm not in a hurry," Ron said. "I have school pickup at 3, the woman in scrubs said quietly, and then seemed to wish she had not said it. "You'll be done by 3, Daniel said. "I promise." He pulled off his coveralls, put on a clean flannel from the office hook, and drove the 4 miles to Pinecrest Elementary at a careful speed because he did not trust what his hands were doing on the wheel. Principal Eames was already standing when he came in. Wyatt was on the floor of the nurse's room with his back against the wall and his knees pulled to his chin. He had taken off his shoes and lined them up beside him, laces tucked inside. His eyes found Daniel and did not quite hold. They slid past, then came back. He was rocking very slightly, the kind of motion a stranger might miss. Daniel sat down on the floor beside him without speaking. He did not touch him. He had learned not to touch first. "Hi, bud. You came at the time you said?" "I did. 10:58. You said 11. 2 minutes early." Wyatt nodded once. The rocking slowed. Principal Eames spoke from the doorway, gentle as she could make it. "Mr. Hatch, can we step into my office?" The conversation was short, and Daniel had been expecting most of it for 6 months. The aide who had been with Wyatt 3 days a week had taken another job. The district had not approved a replacement. The substitute this month had taken Wyatt's noise-cancelling headphones away that morning because the handbook said no electronics on desks. Wyatt had melted down in the lunchroom, not violently, but completely, and the substitute had said twice, in front of other parents, that this child clearly did not belong in a mainstream classroom. "I don't agree with how she said it," Principal Eames said, hands flat on her desk. "I want you to know that, but the truth she clumsied her way into is one we have to talk about. We can no longer accommodate Wyatt here, not without the aid, not the way the building runs right now. I'm sorry, Mr. Hatch. We have to look at other placements." He had thought he was ready to hear this. He was not. "He's 10, Daniel said. "I know. He's been in this school since kindergarten." "I know. Where am I supposed to put him?" She slid a folder across the desk. He did not open it. He felt the heat behind his eyes and locked his jaw and let none of it move past his face. "Take the rest of the week," Principal Eames said. "Take him home. We'll figure out the paperwork." Daniel walked back to the nurse's office. Wyatt was tying his shoes, double knots, the way Daniel had taught him. He stood up when Daniel came in. He did not ask any questions. Because he had heard everything from where he sat, the door had not been all the way closed, and his hearing was very good. "Are we going to the shop?" Wyatt asked. "We're going to the shop. Will I have to sit in the office?" "You can sit in the waiting room. There's a chair by the window. I'll bring your tablet from home. I have an apple in my backpack. That'll do for now." He drove home for the tablet, a pair of orange ear protectors, and a small zippered bag with 3 pencils and a pad of graph paper. Then he drove to the shop, and Wyatt walked in beside him with the ear protectors already on his head, not over his ears yet, just sitting there like a halo, ready. The 4 people in the waiting room looked up. Daniel introduced Wyatt to none of them on purpose. He set him in the chair by the window, opened the tablet to the river fishing video Wyatt had been working through that week, and went back to the bay to drop Mr. Whitley's truck. He was under the Tahoe with a flashlight when he heard Edna's knitting needles stop. "What's that you're watching, sweetheart?" A long pause. Daniel held his breath. Wyatt did not always answer strangers, and the day had used him hard already. "It's a video about how trout see," Wyatt said. "How do they see?" Another pause. Then, in the careful, flat voice Wyatt used when he was about to explain something at length, "Their eyes are on the sides of their heads, so they can look in two directions at once, but they have a blind spot in front of their nose. That's why fly fishermen cast at an angle." "Well, I'll be," Edna said. "Fished 51 years and didn't know that. Now you know." Daniel slid out from under the Tahoe and stood up. Through the doorway he could see Wyatt's face, lit by the tablet. He was not looking at Edna, but he was talking to her. Ron had set his magazine down and was leaning slightly forward, listening. The young woman in scrubs had set her phone firmly on the side table away from her, hands folded in her lap. The kid with the skateboard, who Daniel had pegged as the kind of 19-year-old who would put earbuds in and check out, was looking at Wyatt with something like recognition. "Hey," he said, "what are the orange things for?" Wyatt's eyes flicked at the headphones without touching the kid's face. "They block noise. If the shop gets too loud, I put them on. My little brother has the same ones, blue. Blue is also good." The kid grinned. Daniel turned his head away because he did not want anyone to see his face right then and went back to the Tahoe. By noon he had finished the brake lines. He came out wiping his hands and found Wyatt explaining the lateral line of a fish to all four of them, drawing it on graph paper. Ron had pulled his chair around. Edna had abandoned her knitting in her lap. The woman in scrubs, her name was Priya Soto, had taken off her work badge and set it on the seat beside her, the way you do when you are no longer trying to be somewhere else. "Mr. Whitley, the Tahoe's ready." Ron stood up slowly. He looked at Wyatt, then at Daniel. "Take your time on mine. I think I'll stay a few more minutes." He paid. He did not leave. He sat back down with his keys in his hand and asked Wyatt if there were fish that could see colours, and Wyatt told him about brown trout and the way they responded to certain spinner finishes, and Ron nodded as if he were taking a class. At 12:30, Daniel called the regional special education coordinator at the number Principal Eames had given him. He got voicemail, left a careful message, hung up, and breathed in for 4 and out for 6 the way Wyatt had been taught and had eventually taught him. When he came back out, the kid with the skateboard, his name turned out to be Riley, was sitting on the floor next to Wyatt's chair, drawing a fish on the back of a service estimate. He was a much better artist than the shop had any right to. Wyatt was telling him the fins were wrong. "This one's an adipose. You forgot it. It goes here." "Show me." Wyatt took the pencil without flinching. Daniel watched. He could not remember the last time his son had let a person who was not himself or a doctor take something from his hand and give it back. Edna had a small Tupperware open on her knee. "It's plain," she was saying. "Just a saltine." "What brand?" "Premium." "That's the right brand." He took it. He ate it in 8 bites, breaking the corners off first. He thanked her without looking at her, which was Wyatt's way, and Edna said, "You're welcome, sweetheart," as if she had been thanked properly, which she had. At 1 o'clock, Priya Soto stood up. The Civic she was waiting on had been done for an hour. Daniel had been quietly watching her not leave. "Mr. Hatch." "Yes, ma'am." "My sister teaches at the Roane County Center School. 22 minutes from here. They have a small autism program. They call it the Bridge Classroom. Nobody picks it because the building is ugly. But she would tell you the truth about it if you called her." Daniel did not know what to do with the offer. He had told no one in the room what the school had said that morning. He had introduced his son to no one. He had explained nothing. But Wyatt had been talking for 2 hours about trout, and these people had been listening, and somewhere in the listening, they had figured out enough. "I'd be grateful," he said. Priya tore the corner off her receipt and wrote a name and a number on the back. Lakshmi Soto. She handed it to him with both hands. "She works late. Call her tonight." She paid. She left. Ron paid for the second time, took his keys, and lingered in the doorway, then turned around. "Look," he said. "I do dispatch for the school bus barn. We've got a route that goes right past your shop to the Roane County Center. I could put your boy on that bus if you needed it. You let me know. That's a lot to offer a stranger. I've been coming here 3 years. I'm not a stranger. I just don't talk much." He left. The bell over the door rang once and was quiet. That left Edna and Riley and Wyatt had pulled the ear protectors over his ears not because the shop was loud, but because the room had gotten full of feelings he was not ready to name, and Daniel knew the difference and let him. Edna gathered up her knitting. "Mr. Hatch, may I ask you a personal question?" "Yes." "Do you have anyone?" He took a long second with that. "I have him. I meant for you." "That's not really the point, ma'am." She looked at him with the kind of patience that does not need an answer. "I'm a retired second-grade teacher. 41 years. I have Wednesday afternoons. If you ever need an extra adult in this waiting room on the day your son is here to read a book, to keep him company, to sit while you finish a job, I'd come." Daniel could not speak for a moment. He nodded. She did not press. She paid for her brake-light diagnosis, which Daniel did not charge her for, and she said thank you for nothing, and he said thank you for everything. Riley stood up last. He folded the fish drawing in half and gave it to Wyatt. Then he turned to Daniel. "My mum raised me by herself," he said. "I was the kid who hit curbs too. I know the look on your face. Whatever the school people said, they're not the last word. There's always another building." He pushed the door open with his hip. The bell rang again. The shop got quiet in the way it had been at 10:17, but not the same. The Tahoe was gone. Manny was running a tire balance in the back bay. Wyatt was bent over the folded fish on his lap, fingering the corner. "Dad, they were nice." "They were? Will they come back?" "Some of them, I think." Wyatt thought about that. "Edna is coming on Wednesdays. The busman is putting me on a bus. Priya's sister might be a new teacher. Maybe. We have to talk to her first." Wyatt folded the fish, drawing precisely into quarters. "Today was a bad morning and a good afternoon. I didn't think a day could do that." "It can," Daniel said. "It can do that." He called Lakshmi Soto at 6:40 that evening from the kitchen table while Wyatt was eating chicken nuggets in 7 bites each. She answered on the second ring and talked to him for 40 minutes. She told him the truth about the building. The carpet smelled, the lighting was hard fluorescent in some rooms but soft and warm in the bridge classroom because the teacher had brought her own lamps. She told him the program had 8 kids, 2 full-time aides, a sensory room with a weighted swing, and a waiting list she could move him to the top of because they were 1 student short for the funding formula, and she had been praying for a kid like Wyatt for 3 weeks. She said, "Come till Friday." He said yes. He hung up and looked across the table. "Wyatt, tomorrow I'll call about the new school. The rest of this week you'll come with me to the shop. Can I help?" "You can help. Can I wear the orange ones if it gets loud?" "You can wear them whenever." Wyatt nodded once, ate 2 nuggets, and said, in the careful flat voice he used when he was telling a true thing, "The shop is a good place. The people who come in are not all bad." Daniel laughed a small, short laugh and pressed the heel of his hand against his eye for a second and let him think it was a yawn. On Friday they toured the Roane County Center School. The carpet did smell. The bridge classroom was warm, and the teacher, a woman with grey streaks in her hair and a tank of 3 goldfish on her desk, asked Wyatt his name and then asked him about the goldfish. Wyatt told her about the way goldfish saw colour, and she listened in the way Edna had listened, in the way Ron had listened, the way that has nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with deciding what the other person is saying matters. The following Wednesday, Edna came at 1:30 with a book about Maine lighthouses and 2 saltines in a Ziploc. The Wednesday after, Priya brought her own son for an oil change he did not need, and the 2 boys sat on opposite ends of the waiting room and were perfectly content. Ron stopped by with paperwork for a bus seat starting in October. Riley came in with his mother's car and stayed 2 hours to draw fish. None of them organized it. None of them named it. The waiting room of a small auto shop on the edge of a small town simply, quietly, became a place where a 10-year-old boy with orange ear protectors could sit in a chair by the window and be exactly who he was, and a tired mechanic could finish a brake job knowing the chair was not empty and the people sitting near it were not the wrong ones. On the first Wednesday of October, Wyatt got off the school bus at 7:40 in the morning and walked into the shop with a folded piece of paper in his hand. He had drawn the adipose fin from memory. He gave the drawing to Daniel without ceremony and went to his chair. Daniel taped it inside the door of the parts cabinet where he would see it every time he reached for a filter. "Dad," Wyatt said, "today is a good morning." "Yes," Daniel said. "It is." He turned back to the lift. The compressor breathed. The bell over the door rang, and Edna came in with her knitting, an hour early on purpose, because Wednesdays were Wednesdays now, and the day was not going to ask anyone to be anyone else than they were.